Hey. Welcome to the world of Blenderism. I'm glad to meet you again. I hope you've been waiting for the second episode about the sofa. Because in this episode I will show you how to create procedural materials of velvet, wood, stucco. And I'll also show you what render and compositing settings I use to create such images. Well, I suggest not to delay and get to work right away. And so press the / isolate part of the sofa. We do this because we need to make a UV unwrap for it. But in order to do this, the part must have at least one seam. So let's mark it somewhere at the bottom so that it is not visible. Then apply the scale and do UV unwrap. I'll split the screen vertically to turn on the shader editor on the right side. Here we will create the velvet material. I thought it would fit the English style well. So first we add the image texture and connect it. Since we need to select the velveteen texture downloaded in advance, it is easy to find. We add the coordinate texture and mapping. For this the Wrangler node must be enabled. Now we add the value node for convenient scale control. And immediately increase it by 2 times. And so now we can add color. Let's do this using the RGB node. But we need 2 shades of red, so we use the mix color node. And we connect RGB to it in both slots. Then we add RGB curve and connect it to slot A, which gives us the opportunity to slightly change the red to a darker shade. To do this, let's connect everything as it should be and connect the image texture as a factor. And when we pull the curve a little, the velveteen texture appears. But for now it does not look very realistic. Let's fix this. We need to connect the image texture to sheen. And so we can control sheen using the velvet texture. So good, now we need to choose the right color for this effect. Let's use the eyedropper, select the main red and make it lighter. The result is not particularly visible since the highest value of the texture is 1, this is white, and then we need to multiply it. For this we add the math node and change it to multiply and set the value to 8. Another very important setting is specular. You need to set the IOR level to a very low value. Now you need to add a color ramp and change the black color to a little lighter, and this will give a little sheen to the dark areas, as well. Now you can add some folds for realism. The normal map with them should also be prepared. You can do it yourself. But this is the topic of another lesson. And so we select the coordinate texture, mapping, value and image texture and copy them to save time and not create them separately. But you need to change the map and color space. You need to change from RGB to non-color. This is very important, do not miss this moment. After that, you can connect color to normal. But for now there are no folds because you need to use the normal map and bump nodes to make them visible. Whoosh, and here are the folds. Now we need to reduce the bump and normal map strength a little bit, so that the folds don't stand out too much. In the end, I set the strength of the normal map and bump to 0.6 and 0.4. And another thing that we can to add is an extra bump to velvet material. To do it, we use Voronoi texture. So let's add it and we need to invert it and then we can plug it in the height of the bump node. You see what's going on. Now we need to scale it down to number around 800. Okay, now we can set roughness of principal BSDF to 0.7. Also I set tint of specular to color same as Sheen has. Also we can set roughness of Sheen 0.35. For now it looks good for me, and I think we'll leave it like this for now. If you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen. Now we need to quickly assign this material to the rest of the sofa. And to do this, we need to carry out the already known procedure for each of them. Press the / to isolate the object, in edit mode with the Alt pressed, mark the seam, scale the object, and make it UV unwrap. After that, you can assign the finished material. If you don't like the location of the velvet texture, you can tweak it in the mapping. In general, I will show 2 details, with the rest, everything is exactly the same. When the velvet material is ready, you can move on to the wood material. About it, I can say that although it is quite simple, but it seems to me that it looks cool and is quite convenient to use. And so now I will place the shader below. And quickly add a color ramp, a noise texture and a Voronoi texture. Next, I use Ctrl-T to add mapping and coordinates. Leave the generated mode connected. Connect distance to the vector. We connect the factor to the factor, and the color to the color. Now on the sliders of the color ramp node you need to set the brown color, but one is lighter and the other is darker. We can also choose the shade of brown by moving the sliders. After that, you need to adjust the scale, details and roughness of the noise and Voronoi textures. Watch the indicators on the screen. And now let's add a little realism by adding the bump node. It needs to be plugged into the noise texture factor and normal, after which the strength needs to be set to 0.2. Well, at this point you can play with the settings, try moving the sliders of the color ramp node and adjust the color shades, try to twist the mapping data. When you finish with this, adjust the roughness. As we know, wood is usually varnished, should shine a little. The value of 0.25 suited me. You can also twist the roughness of the Voronoi texture, this gives interesting results. And so we have dealt with this, let's move on to the wooden floorboards. At this point, I want to note that I will definitely add all these materials to my asset library. This will greatly simplify the work in the future, since you can simply add an asset with a ready-made material and tweak it a little if necessary. And so we use the already prepared wood material. But we need to copy it, since we will be changing its components. First, delete the Voronoi texture. Now we need to change the shade of brown, which I don't really like, it's kind of greenish. Now we add the brick texture and connect its mapping. I will immediately set the color of the seams to gray, so that I don't have to come back to this. Now we can reduce the scale to 3, and in order to connect this texture we will need color mix. We turn on the color amp in B and turn on the brick texture in A. The sequence is important, since the brick texture should be on top. Now the mode can be changed to multiply and the factor set to 1. As you can see, the brick texture is now on top. Now in the brick texture settings you can set the smoothness of the transitions, the width of the tile, the length of the tile. A very cool bias setting, it gives random tiles slightly different shades of color. I set it to -0.6 so that this effect was weak. Well, now we need to make a relief for the joints of the boards. To do this, we add a bump node, connect the color to the height. And in order to combine two bump nodes, you need to use vector mathematics in the add mode. At this point, I got a small jam, but you can easily fix it. You just need to add a separate coordinate texture and mapping for the brick texture. Well, do not forget to set the strength of the bump node to 0.5. I noticed that the noise texture is not quite right. I don't like it. I need to tweak it a little in the texture mapping. After that, you need to make the effect of a varnished floor. This is done using roughness and the coat setting. You need to find a balance between the two. And that's it, the floor is ready. We are great, cool Blender masters. Add wood material to the remaining elements and you can move on. If you look at the reference, you will see that there is a decorative molding on the wall similar to a picture frame, so we will model it now. I understand that this release should be materials, but this must be done because there is no other way. So, add a curve rectangle. Then take references from the internet, press 1 on the numpad so that it is placed immediately under 90 degrees, this is important for modeling. Add a plane, place it opposite the reference and begin to create the shape we need. In general, to be honest, I got a little confused and forgot that we only need a contour, so you cannot bother too much and just place the vertices along the contour. Since in the end this contour will need to be converted into a curve. Now we select a rectangle from the curve, go to the Geometry tab and change the bevel from round to object, and as an example of an object we select the shape that we created the curve. Now it needs to be scaled a little and expanded decorative molding. Well, now you can place it on the wall. For this you need to stretch it to the size of the wall and apply a scale to it so that the thickness of the molding is the same everywhere along the perimeter. And also in order to multiply the number of these parts, you need to apply the array modifier. But you need to switch it from relative offset to constant offset. So good, done. Now you can make stucco material for walls and moldings. I will raise another window from the bottom, switch it to shading and work here. Create a new material, give it a name. Now you can add a noise texture, connect the texture coordinates and mapping to it, and press Ctrl-Shift left click to connect them directly for clarity. Now you can change the texture scale by about 600. Now we add a node that changes the colors to black and white, it is called RGB to BW. Now we can add a math node, set it to power and set the value to 4. The next node is math, but already in multiplane mode. And we add another bump node. It should be connected in height and we get a normal map. Now you can include it as usual in the BSDF principle in normal. Additionally, we can include it in the normals in the bump node, but after this the material becomes a little blackish. Now we will fix this. Let's add a value node for more convenient scale control. And immediately set it to 2. So to fix the light you need to delete the node principal BSDF and replace it with diffuse BSDF, but not one but 2 pieces connected using a mix shader. Whoosh, and the material became a little whiter. Well, that's good, we can continue. I suggest moving on to setting the frame, but if you go to the general plan, I immediately see that there is not enough width for this in the editing mode. Select the outer edges and in the options put a tick opposite the correct face attribute. With its help the texture will not stretch after I stretch the face, a very convenient thing, I recommend using it. Now I want to make a window from which the sunlight will fall on the vintage sofa. To do this, you need to subdivide the wall where the window will be and remove some faces. Now you need to add walls and a ceiling. For this we will use a new plane, and the material that I will add to them will be simply white and with low roughness so that it reflects the light. I will use them as reflective panels of the studio. They will not fall into the frames, but they have their own task, to scatter light, and so I have now switched to the render mode. I want to adjust the lighting of the world. To do this, open the shading window below and switch to the world editing mode. And if you turn on the world settings tab on the right. Then after clicking on the color, a menu will pop up in which you need to select sky texture. This will automatically connect the node that we will now configure. But first I suggest going to the engine and cycles since this is where I will render, so it needs to be configured. I switch to using the GPU. I set the number of render samples to 240. In the noise reduction tab, I set it to use the video card. I go to the light paths and disable 2 reflective checkboxes. Then in the color management tab, I set the view to high contrast. Now you can go to the output settings. I put a check mark opposite the render region, in order to remove the load from the video card during operation, since we will only see what is in the camera lens. I set 30 frames per second, this is already a habit, you also need to specify the save path. I change the color depth from 8 to 16. Next, in the settings in the view layer in the passes tab, I turn off the combined check mark and check the boxes opposite the passes that I will use in compositing. You will understand at the end why I do this. Now in the world settings I find the settings tab and change the sampling from auto to manual. This allows you to speed up the rendering of the image. And quite significantly, after that, you can position the camera. After I pressed 0 on the numpad and went to the camera view, I pressed the Shift F combination, which I set for myself manually, and it allows me to quickly turn on the walk navigation mode. Very convenient. I recommend that you set up such a function for yourself. But this is the topic of a separate lesson. Now we need to add an empty to the scene so that we can adjust the depth of field according to it. Okay, we can go to camera settings and set focal length to 70 mm. I put the focus on 2, I think it will be a suitable value in this scene. Since I don't need any blurriness. So now, and if you could notice we are missing another wall, I just copy the one on the right. It needs to be expanded and stretched along the x-axis. And it already has a white material with low roughness. And you will probably think why I closed the camera. And this is easy to fix. Go to the object settings, find the visibility tab there, and uncheck the box next to the camera. And this is fantastic, the camera does not see this wall. Now you can move the sofa a little closer to the corner and return to the sunlight settings. The first thing we need to do is adjust the angle and height at which the sun will be located. The thing is that we will not have one sun but two, but one needs to be slightly moved to the side by a couple of degrees and the size of one sun set to 5 and the second to 1. The intensity of each sun should be approximately 0.4 each. Now we use mix color to combine the two suns. In order to limit or control the warmth of the light, we add a blackbody node and set it to 2.500, well, and to connect it, we use another color mix, but the black body must be connected from above. Now we can add another interesting effect of the glossy surface of the world. To do this, add a mix shader, add a light path node and connect is glossy ray as a factor. And also copy the background node and connect it to the second slot. This gives us the opportunity to set the color with which the scene will be filled. I set it as yellow-green to give the sunlight a realistic look. So good, but we're not done yet. And strength of second background should be set to 10. If you look closely, you'll notice that there are quite a few dark spots in the scene. This is due to insufficient lighting. To fix this, I add a light panel, enlarge it and place it under the ceiling. You need to play around with the power a little to find the right value for us. And I also reduced the beam shape to 120 degrees. You can also give it a slightly yellow-green color. I also noticed that I have few objects in the scene, so I added a desk with the Blender kit. I also downloaded the Mona Lisa painting from the Blender kit. I created pillows. If you are interested in how to do this, you can watch the lesson about the gaming chair. There I show the procedure step by step. And I created a plinth along the wall in a circle. And I noticed that the desk is not lit enough, so we use another light area, scale it, direct it to the table as needed. But there is one thing that it shines on the sofa. To fix this, select our light panel, go to the object settings, find the shading tab, and in it we find the light linking tab and add the collection there, which contains the objects we want to shine on. Whoosh and done, we no longer shine on the sofa. After we have made sure that everything is configured correctly, we can click on the render image. But this is not the final yet, there is also compositing, this is post-processing of the image. As I told you, I will show you a very interesting and powerful way of noise reduction. The thing is that we split the rendered image into parts and denoise each of these parts separately and then put the image back together. On the right you can see the checkboxes that should be checked. Since we split the image into parts, we need 14 denoisers and connect them all in turn. I'm speeding up the video playback a little if you don't mind. Next we need to plug denoising normal into each blue connector out of 14, and denoising albedo to each yellow connector. So we have disassembled and denoised our image, now we need to put it back together. For this we use mix color in multiplay modes. For this we will need 6 of them. After that we use mix color in add mode to combine parts of the image. Taking this opportunity, I want to thank you for your subscriptions, for your comments. I am truly interested in hearing your reactions. Since so far this is our only way of communication. I hope you learned something useful from this lesson. Well, as always, learn hot buttons. They will make your life easier. Take your time, try different settings and pray for Ukraine. Thank you, bye.